Welcome to Coffee and History, a conversation with Alabama heritage. We are your host. I'm Rebecca Mender.
I'm Susan Reynolds.
And I'm Caroline Gazera McKenzie.
Join us as we sit down with some of the most fascinating folks in the Alabama community as we tell the stories of Alabama that educate, inspire, and, we hope, entertain.
Before we introduce today's guest, this is the segment we like to call Did You Know?
Did you know?
It's a fun fact about the state of Alabama that might be new to our listeners or to us, most likely to us, or me specifically.
We learn a lot in this segment.
I really do. So, listeners, did you know that Springville, Alabama once produced an unusually high number of radio amateur operators?
I did not.
But our guest probably did. So this radio boom was led by local mentor named Walt Coleman, who's inspired many residents to get licensed.
You know, I didn't know that. But, my parents were also involved in what we call ham radio. And I don't remember what their call numbers were, but when I was a kid, I have a friend. I'm going to back up now. I have a friend who calls me the queen of all media, and I don't think he means that in a good way. I'm going to call him out, Matt Orndorff. But he does call me the queen of all media. And I blame it on my parents because they did, ham radio. And when I was a kid, we were in the Tuscaloosa newspaper. And so there's a picture of my dad with me, and I'm probably maybe 1 month old, in his arms. And he's sitting at his desk with a microphone, right? Or I guess you don't call it microphone. We'll get into that. But he's sitting there with his microphone. And then my mom is in the station wagon and she's driving, one hand on the steering wheel, the other hand is on, her microphone. The caption was, Ed Todd is talking to Ruby, letting her know that she needs to hurry home because the baby needs its diaper changed.
You were an it.
So welcome to the 1960s, folks. But that was my first experience with ham radio and my first experience of being in the media. But I thought that was hilarious. I wish I could remember their call numbers, but I know they loved it. And they had a whole group here in Tuscaloosa that, they participated with in that. So
yeah, definitely.
There's a lot of people who still do it today.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll talk some more about that with our guests.
Yeah, definitely. And our guest today has credited his first two jobs in broadcasting directly to the fact that he was already a licensed ham radio operator. He is a critically acclaimed and prolific author of nearly 50 books. A native of Springville, Alabama, he spent more than 20 years as an award-winning broadcast journalist and on-air personality before turning to full-time writing in 1995. Please welcome to our podcast, Don Keith.
Woo!
Thank you so very much. It's great to be here.
You're welcome so
I'm
very
really
much.
excited to learn more. So before we get started with everything, could you tell our listeners what is a ham radio? Because for my generation, possibly, I learned about it through some TV shows or other things, not necessarily what y'all might have learned.
Way back just after the turn of the century, the people who invented radio were ham radio operators. They literally built their own radios and started transmitting, and that led to the creation of what became broadcast radio. It's still a very active and thriving hobby today. Over 1 million amateur radio operators around the world, about 600,000 of those are in the U.S.
Wow.
The University of Alabama has a very active amateur radio club still, but it allows you to do not just talk, not just pick up a microphone and talk, but we do things like bounce signals off the moon. We have amateur radio satellites in orbit above our heads right now as we speak.
Wow.
Of course, you'll see a lot of hams participating in public service activities, runs and bike rides and that sort of thing. And also, when the weather turns bad, a lot of the storm spotters are ham radio operators because there are a lot of them and they're mobile and they can get out and communicate.
So the technology, though, in terms of, because honestly, I don't really remember a whole lot except for, I'm calling it a microphone, but what do you call what you would speak into?
That's a microphone.
You call it a microphone? Mm-hmm. Because it's held different. It looks like a walkie-talkie in a way to me. And so do you have to have or back in the day, maybe not today, but back then, did you used to have an antenna at your house that would help you to reach the different places?
It depends on what you're doing with the hobby. And you're probably talking about, we call them HT or handy talkie. It's a small little radio receiver transmitter.
Right.
And it does have a little antenna on it. Or you can have a tower in the backyard with a big old bunch of beams on top of it and Depends on what you're doing with a hobby.
Gosh, that is so very cool.
Crazy. And I'm so interested.
Well, it's such a great hobby to introduce people not only to electronics. You don't have to be technical even, just enough to pass a little test and get your license. But if you do want to be technical, you can build anything. A lot of it is digital, computerized. It's certainly kept up with changes in electronics. But it also helps to learn to communicate.
Yeah.
And gosh knows we need to learn to communicate better.
Yes, I agree with that.
And it can also lead to a career, which it did for me.
So in the era of instant digital communication, how does the magic of shortwave radio continue to inspire the themes of your work?
Shortwave is not as active as it once was for obvious reasons. The internet pretty much just like it has done to all. By the way, media has changed since we started talking a few minutes ago.
Oh, yes.
And shortwave, not nearly as ubiquitous as it used to be, but you could still get on and listen to Radio Moscow. You can listen to Radio Havana. You could get radio signals from Beijing, China, if you want to, through the short waves. And, of course, you can listen to police and airplanes and all that sort of thing, too.
Yeah, my dad bought me a little shortwave radio when I was about 11 or 12, and I used to listen to the Spanish stations that I could get because it was the only way I could really practice. And so that was always a big thing. But I loved scanning and just seeing, like, who can I find? What languages am I hearing?
That's what got me into it. The magic of being able to hear a radio station from New Orleans all the way to Springville, Alabama.
Exactly.
Right.
Wow.
Let alone one from Havana or Moscow.
Exactly. And I heard Sputnik when the Russians first launched Sputnik. My dad called me in to hit a little shortwave receiver. He said, listen to this. Psh, psh, psh. Psh, psh, psh. Okay, what's that? That's Sputnik. And it just went over.
Wow.
And it could drop a bomb on us. So I went and got under the table and hid.
Of course, as one would do.
Yes.
Well, as people can probably tell, you have a definite radio voice, which we love, and you are actually named Radio Personality of the Year, like in 2 separate categories. Are you the only person that was?
As far as I know, for
honor?
Billboard anyway, I'm the only one that has that distinct honor.
And that's Billboard Magazine,
Billboard
correct?
Magazine,
Yes,
right?
I think
that's pretty fancy.
that's very cool, very impressive to us young kids. Thinking about how your radio works in turn with your writing, is there a way that you've been using your radio voice to pace or create some type of engagement between your characters? I mean, how has that filtered into your writing?
Surprisingly, at least the way radio used to be, when you were a disc jockey and you sat there with 2 turntables and a couple of tape machines and a microphone and you're sitting in a little room all by yourself, and you're trying to create something that's going to affect somebody emotionally. They're having a bad day, you play them a nice song, and you say something that perks them up. Writing, for me at least, is exactly the same thing. I'm sitting in a tiny room all by myself.
Right.
And whether it's radio or writing, once you cast it out there, you can't take it back. Right. It's a done deal. So you better be as good as you can be when you start.
Right.
So they're actually very similar, but it all goes back to storytelling. It's just when I was a disc jockey, you had to tell that story in 10 seconds over a Paul Revere's and the Raiders record.
Right.
Now,
exactly.
Now you got a novel, you can use 120,000 words if you want to.
Right, exactly. Or if it's, online, you can keep it perpetually going.
Yes.
And never stop.
Mm-hmm. Well, or write book series like I do.
Right, exactly.
I've got an 11-book series, and they're all about 110,000 words. That's a lot of words.
That's a lot of talking. So were you like me in your 2nd grade report card? Your teacher said you had lots of potential, but you talk too much?
She said, you need to quit making these little essays rhyme. Because I wanted to write poetry, and then I found out you can't make money writing poetry. So.
Aw. Well, I feel like both of us have probably succeeded. So I don't know who your 2nd grade teacher was, but
Miss Buffington.
Yeah, I don't remember my teacher's name, but she did say I talk too much. But here I am. So there you go.
There you go.
It has served you well.
You put it to good use.
I guess
That's
so.
right. So you've written a really wide variety of books, everything from military thrillers, historical nonfiction, biographies. But you've also worked on something called the Untold Millions Oral History Project. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, first, I'm very lucky to be able to write books that I would like to read, the subjects that I'm interested in. Fortunately, I found publishers who are willing to actually pay me money to do that. Untold Millions is, writing the nonfiction books, I'm obviously trying to find people who lived through what I'm writing about, especially World War II, and that's getting to be more and more difficult
Definitely.
as we lose more and more veterans from that terrible war. It occurred to me that we are burying literally millions of wonderful stories, literally millions of actual events that people saw, eyewitness history. So this project is just me trying to convince people to go out and record Grandpop talking about what he did in Korea, or Meemaw talking about being a nurse in Europe in World War II, before all those stories are buried. And I hope people will do it, not only record them, write them down, self-publish them as books even. They don't have to be professionally written at all. Or donate what you find to the World War II Museum in New Orleans or the Library of Congress Veterans Project. So those, not only will they save them, but they'll index them. And hack writers like me can find a particular battle or a particular submarine or whatever it is I'm writing about. I can actually find an oral history about that.
Right.
I mean, that's so important to keep those stories alive because, you know, we have spoken to people on this podcast who are doing lots of oral histories, whether it's, you know, civil rights or, you know, those types of things. And so it is good to have these people who have gone to battle and who have served this country and to be able to document. And I think it's great for the families to do those as well, because like you're saying, you know.
If nobody ever sees them but the rest of the family.
I think that, yeah, because that way they know. Because I think a lot of people, you know, the men, especially that would come back from war, they were just so devastated, didn't know what to do with themselves, and didn't want to talk about it.
Probably weekly, I get an email from somebody that says, now I know what Daddy did on the USS Neosho. He would never talk about it.
Yeah.
Right.
And now I know what happened on that ship. And I'm also trying to emphasize it's not just war. It's the civil rights movement. It's the space program. It's the computer age. It's the invention of the transistor, which happened the same year I was born, by the way. But we need to capture all of this. And people say, well, I didn't do anything but drive a truck or I dug a ditch or whatever in the war.
It's important.
You helped win the war by driving that truck or digging that ditch.
Right.
Exactly.
I mean, that's kind of like I always say, you know, here at the magazine, I stole this line from Mike Riley, who was one of the owners of Randall Riley Publishing. And I love it today. He always says, you know, we're all in sales. And so, you know, and he's a sales guy. So he's going to make sure everybody says, you know, we're all in sales. But honestly, he's really right, because what he's trying to say is everybody's role is important. And when you're working for a magazine like us, everybody's role is important. It doesn't matter if you are the one who is recruiting the people who are writing for the magazine, or if you're the person who's paying that person to write for us, or if you're promoting that article, or you're fundraising for us, all the different things that you're doing, or if you're just working on the database in the background. Everybody's story is important. And I feel like that's really good for you to hear these people when they say, well, I was just a truck driver. It's like, dude, I mean, truck drivers are badasses, and especially in war, to get things from point A to point B.
Exactly. You're delivering food,
Yes.
K-rations or whatever, to the soldiers who are having to go out and fight, and they couldn't do that if you weren't driving that truck.
That's right. That's right.
I think as humans, we try to undercut what we've done in our lives because we don't want to talk about it, you know, too much, be too braggy or whatnot. So, or on the other hand, the trauma of it, you can't talk about it. And we know that from experience through other wars.
Well, what we end up finding out is what the admirals and the generals did, but we don't know what Private Smith did. And what Private Smith did is just as important, especially to Private Smith's family, as anybody else. And let's tell those stories because it helps our understanding of the war.
Is this online? Is this a
Yes.
where can people find this?
UntoldMillions.net.
UntoldMillions.net.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's really
and
interesting.
that will be in the link in bio.
Yeah.
Yeah. And is there a story you've come across that is just like one of your favorites, or just something that really sticks out in your head?
Oh, about 1 million
I mean,
that are still untold, by the way.
exactly.
There is one that's kind of sad. I was writing a book about the USS Neosho, which was an oiler, not a warship at all. And at the Battle of the Coral Sea, the admiral sent them 200 miles south because they didn't want the Japanese to destroy their only source of fuel, not only for their aircraft carriers, but for the airplanes. And they're 200 miles south. The Japanese spot it. See, they think it's one of our carriers, and they end up sinking it. It took 8 days to sink, and that's what the book's all about. But I could not find a single survivor from that ship. And then somebody told me, well, there's a guy in Corpus Christi at the Veterans Home that can tell you all you need to know. So I called him up and I talked to him. And sure enough, he talked about some of the guys that were there and what happened to them and all of that. I said, fantastic. And then I learned when that battle happened, the fellow that I was talking to was on a train crossing the U.S. He was not aboard the ship.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh.
He thought he was. He was convinced that he was. And he had that same sort of reaction that a lot of people have when you leave a ship or you leave an infantry brigade or whatever, and something bad happens to them. You've got that survivor's remorse.
Yeah.
And I think that was what affected him so much. Now, a lot of what he told me really did help because I was able to verify that some of it happened, but that just was because he had talked to them. But again, he was convinced he was there.
Wow. That is sad.
Yeah, my uncle
Really interesting.
My uncle served in the Navy, and when my mom passed away, she bequeathed us one of my uncle's manuscripts, which I probably should just turn over to you and have you help me with it one day. So be prepared. I'll give you a call later.
While I'm resting.
When you have nothing else better to do after
I'm
writing
3
50 books.
I'm writing 3 right now.
Oh, you got plenty of free
Whoa,
time.
So then you can write 4. That's okay.
And sometimes they merge. I can't help it.
No.
But, I started reading his manuscript, and it's just amazing, some of the stories, because it's almost like, he spends a lot of time talking about, serving on a naval ship and that kind of thing. But then also the stories of just him growing up and what his childhood was like and everything. And I think people who are doing these oral histories, it's important to document everything. So, just not just the time that you serve, but what is this person like? And let's get this full, well-rounded story.
And that's why I'm so fortunate. My co-author on the series that we are just writing the 4th book in right now, and that'll be the final book for a while, is called A Call to War. The first book is The Kaboom Boys. My co-author's father was one of the very first bomb demolition captains in World War II. Nobody knows anything about those guys. What would make somebody decide to enlist? And her dad had a 4F, by the way. He did not have to worry about getting drafted, but
What is a 4F?
that's where you are not physically capable of serving.
Okay.
And he went ahead and had the doctor lie and say he was, so he could go defuse live bombs that
no,
didn't
thank
explode.
you. No, thank you.
That would not be a job
A
for
lot
me.
of that goes back to his growing up in a coal mining town in Pennsylvania.
Right.
But a lot of it was he wanted to see the world and he wanted adventure. He wanted to live an adventurous life, and he certainly did.
Wow.
And fortunately for us, it gave us some of the background. We didn't take all of it. We modified some of it. That is a part of The Kaboom Boys, which is the first book in the series, A Call to War. And the second one is out now, The Blacksmith of Dachau. Her dad was also one of the very first people to help liberate Dachau.
Wow.
They had called in the bomb squad just in case there were booby traps or whatever there. But they ended up carrying stretchers and helping people and stopping them from eating too much because a lot of the prisoners died because they were so hungry.
Yeah.
And they ate too much. But that's the kind of stories that we were able to tell.
Oh, I didn't even think about that with them eating too much right after.
So you've obviously mentioned that you're a very prolific writer, especially in the history community, but you've also had books co-authored with experts from I can't talk today, apparently.
That's okay.
Spring fever.
Former naval commanders like George Wallace, who is not the governor, just so we know.
Different George Wallace.
Different George. To your latest work with Elaine Peake on the Kaboom Boys, which you have been mentioning. What's the process of navigating between your own words and those of your co-authors?
I always get that question. Fortunately, I've found some people who I could not have written these books without them, and they readily admit they could have not have written these books without me. As I say, they provide the story and the background, and I do the adjectives and adverbs modestly, but no fistfights, no lawsuits. So far, it's been great. And I've written with some very interesting people. One of them was Captain William Anderson. And all you guys are way too young to know about the USS Nautilus going to the North Pole in 1958. Under the polar ice, the first vessel to go to the North Pole ever. Well, Bill and I sat together in Leesburg, Virginia, and helped write the story of that miraculous submarine. It was our first atomic-powered vessel of any kind. And Bill knew that Sputnik had something to do with it because President Eisenhower told Bill, take that submarine to the North Pole because we got to counter that thing they put in the air above us. But I couldn't have written the book without him, obviously.
Right.
I couldn't have done this series with Elaine without her either.
Well, so was your background military? Did you serve in the military?
I was in Air Force ROTC at the University of Alabama because every male student had to be for their first 2 years. And that was it.
So it is important then, because it seems like, to get that authenticity with the books, that you do have to partner with somebody or do a whole heck of a lot of research. I mean, because like Susan said, the variety of topics that you cover, whether it's biographies or military history of some point, that's a lot of research.
I don't know nothing about no submarines. But George Wallace does.
Right.
He was a skipper for 2 years, the USS Houston. And he took it into a lot of places that he can't talk about and did things he can't talk about.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
I understand that very well, being a former military child.
Yep. George kids me, and he says, if we put something in there that we shouldn't, Don, you've got to take the blame for it. And I couldn't tell you it was true, or I would be divulging that it was that it actually happened.
That's amazing.
I don't think we have, and if we have, I hope the statute of limitations has run out by now.
Exactly.
Well, let me ask you about one of your books, Firing Point, which was made into a film that starred Gary Oldman and
Gerard Butler.
Yeah.
And Common.
And
And
Common, of
Common.
course.
Linda Cardellini.
I love that. So I have actually seen that film, and I thought it was great. But I wanted to ask what your experience was like, because I've also talked to Winston Groom, who wrote Forrest Gump. Thank you, everyone. With Winston Groom, he loved the idea that his book became a movie, but obviously Hollywood has to take certain,
Creative liberties.
That's a great way of putting it. So it's not always the same as the book, as most people know. And so what was your thought when they were going to adapt this? And were you able to help more with the script writing?
Yeah, it worried me because who knows, once you sign that option, they can go make whatever film they want to make.
Right.
And it could not even resemble the book that you originally wrote.
Right. And it can just say, based on the
Yes.
book by.
And it worried George even more because he's very active in the submarine veterans community. And he knew if they really junked this thing up and made it silly, that he was going to get a lot of feedback from his buddies. As it turned out, we didn't get script approval, but they did let us look at it, and we flagged some things that were very obviously wrong that would never have happened. Among those, the fact that they had women on the submarines.
I did notice that, because when I was watching the film, I thought, they kept showing this like one actress. And she didn't have any speaking parts, but that really shone a light to me, because I thought, what is she doing over there?
There is more to the story. It took 11 years from the day we signed the option agreement until that movie premiered. And by then, there are women submariners now.
Yes.
But not back then.
But at the time, no.
Actually, some of the female sailors that you saw in that film were actual Navy sailors because they shot footage on an active duty submarine out of Hawaii. Anytime you see a bunch of sailors running and jumping, going down the ladders and going below decks and that kind of thing, those were actual footage on
Did you
Navy
get to
submarines.
be on the set or anything like that?
No, George actually went in. They built an actual model of a Los Angeles class submarine on a soundstage in London, where a lot of the Star Wars stuff was shot. And George did go over and spend a few days there. The Navy sent to the production company and to the director all the specifications that weren't classified for that. And they even the cables that run from the monitors are the actual colors of the cables that they would have used. So it's very accurate.
Very accurate.
It's still there because there was some thought at some point of it being a series of movies. Gerard Butler really wanted to do that because he didn't have to do a lot of physical stuff, and he's getting on up in years.
Yeah. So who do you think nailed their part, Gerard Butler or Gary Oldman?
Look.
Or Common?
Common is a great rapper when it comes to acting.
Okay.
We actually had 2 Academy Award winners in that movie. Gary Oldman, obviously, he won for playing Churchill.
Yeah.
And Common.
Yeah.
Common won the Academy Award for producing the theme for the movie Selma.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
So we can brag and say we've got
That's
a
right.
couple of Academy Award winners. Now, if Linda would go ahead and win one,
But which do you think really did nail the character in your vision?
To me, I think it's the best acting job I've seen Gerard Butler do.
Okay. Yeah.
Mostly he runs and shoots and rolls and fights and that kind of thing, drives cars crazy. But in this thing, I thought he nailed the part. He was our Joe Glass. By the way, that's a thrill to look up and see Gerard Butler saying words that
you wrote.
That I wrote.
Yeah, I can only
George
imagine.
wrote.
Yeah. I mean, so do you ever write like that? Thinking when I'm writing a book, it's like, oh, I can envision this as a film and this is who I want to play the role. And
For some writers, that actually works.
Yeah.
Because you're able to picture Gerard Butler playing your hero and Linda Cardellini being your love interest, or even though she wasn't in this movie. But to me, that almost puts you into forcing you to write that character as it would be played by that person. And it could be fine, or it could be lead you off or box you in or whatever.
yeah, I could see it boxing you in because it's like, no, this is the only person I can envision playing this part.
Yeah.
And then it comes off being completely different.
And then you find your readers see it as a totally different person playing that part,
Yeah, definitely.
which is fine. You picture that character as you're reading the book anyway.
Right.
You know, my husband was talking about book covers one day, and he said, I think, you know, if you have characters on a book cover, they should not be looking at you. They should be like looking away. So that way the reader actually can envision who they think that person should be. And I think that was pretty good observation. I've never really even thought about it. But like even when we're doing our own reading, even of Harry Potter, I mean, it's like when you see Harry Potter on the big screen, is that really what you envision these people to look like, you know? And so I love that idea of thinking about, you know, blocking the character.
Yeah, and that's what goes back to, does the movie follow the book?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't picture him looking that way, so it's a terrible movie.
Yeah, I've been guilty of doing that when Hollywood has taken some of my favorite series and converted them.
I have a coffee mug my daughter-in-law gave me that said, the book is better.
Yes.
Most of the time, in my opinion, it is.
Oh, that's the best gift ever. I love that.
So the Kaboom Boys has been compared to the Band of Brothers. Do you foresee it also becoming a film?
If they don't make this thing into a movie, they're crazy. It is. It is. I've done some. I think all 46 of my books so far are cinematic, but this one is especially cinematic, and that's really how it started.
Right.
Elaine had written a screenplay based on things that she had learned about her father, beginning with attending his funeral at Arlington Cemetery.
Oh.
That's the first time some of the other of his squad members who'd served with him in World War II started telling her about him and what he did, because he had never shared that with his family. And thank goodness they did, because that inspired her to try to do that screenplay. And she asked me to come in and kind of help polish it up a little bit. We were not able to sell it. Selling a screenplay is like winning the Mega Ball lottery or whatever.
Good to know.
It's tough to do.
Right.
But then one of her friends who was in the entertainment industry said, you really ought to turn it into a book. And a bookstore owner down in Miami, Books and Books, which is a big chain down in South Florida, said the same thing. He just happens to own a movie production company with his sister, too. And he said, we don't look at anything unless it's a book first, because we can read the full story and not a 90-page script.
Right.
Which is, nobody looks at a script longer than about 90 pages, by the way. So that was the key to getting it there. And I think because of that, and really the first book is based very much on the script. So it is very cinematic.
But he also does film. So why hasn't he picked it up yet?
Who's that?
The guy who said
Miami.
you should
Oh,
turn
in
it up
Miami.
into a book. And
Because his films are normally about a $5 million budget,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
as far as I can tell.
yeah.
He did the Guernsey Potato Peel Society film. He and his sister did that. They did The Man Who Invented Christmas about
Okay.
Charles
Yes,
Dickens
Charles
when he wrote
Dickens.
The Christmas Story.
Nice.
And it's a good film, too.
Yeah, it is.
But they're smaller films.
Yeah.
But who knows?
Maybe one day.
I still think it's going to be it should be a streaming series. That's just
that
the
would be
author
awesome.
talking.
Okay, well, our friends at Netflix who are watching this
Or Hulu.
podcast are listening, then well, I don't
Netflix,
ha-
Hulu,
we'll take
HBO
all
Max,
of them. Disney Plus,
There you go.
anybody, any of our connections that are listening to this podcast, you know, you heard it here first.
Yep.
That's right. That's
Film
right.
rights are still available and unencumbered.
There you go. There you go.
So definitely reach out to Dawn when you get a chance.
Yes.
That's right. That's right. So about 30 years ago, your debut novel, The Forever Season, won Fiction of the Year from the Alabama Library Association. Thinking about sort of the landscape of Southern literature today and maybe the Alabama novel today, how do you think that has changed since the time that you wrote that book?
I think it may be more reality than it was then. Mm-hmm. It's the story of a young man who is a good football player. He wants to knock down quarterbacks and make them bleed. He's a linebacker. But he also wants to study and learn about Romantic period poetry and Shakespeare. Mm-hmm. And he gets a scholarship to a big fictitious Southeastern Conference college. And everybody he meets is trying to knock him down, whether it's jealousy or for whatever reason, including his own family, who's kind of dysfunctional too. It's Southern Gothic. I didn't realize there was even such a genre, but Southern Gothic is what it is. But when you consider what's going on in athletics nowadays, I think it even more germane. Thank goodness it's still in print. Yeah. Thanks to the good folks at the University of Alabama Press.
Yay, UA
That's
Press.
Wonderful, yeah.
Well, I feel like somebody whose story has yet to be told is Jalen Hurts. And he's a guy who keeps getting knocked down. And he just waits his time. And things happen and they come to him. And he was the quarterback for the University of Alabama that, famously got benched by Coach Saban. And so he did what he was supposed to do. And then finally he came in clutch, toward the end of the season. But then it's like he transferred to another college and then he got drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles. And people either love him or hate him. And it's just amazing, he keeps producing. The people just want to beat him down, That is one of those stories I would love to have time to be able to tell. Mm-hmm. I'd love to sit down with him and hear his perspective, his side of what happened. I don't think I'll ever get Nick Saban's side necessarily. Well, you might. You never know.
It worked out pretty well.
I heard he listens to this podcast.
Okay. All right.
It may not be true, but I heard that.
Coach, I still have a year of eligibility left, and I was a pretty good tight end back at Springville.
Oh, my goodness.
That's hilarious.
But that's one I always wanted to talk with Dabo Swinney, who is the Clemson head coach, who does things his own way, believe me.
And played at Alabama.
And everybody thought he was going to come back here and coach when.
And his is such a powerful story. Anyway, he lived in a car for a while. His family was very, very poor. My two sons actually played football with him at Pelham High School. Oh. And I thought that might be a way to get in, but I've tried to reach him and just no luck whatsoever. But I don't have time.
Yeah.
So many stories, so
many.
Well, that means you have to inspire future writers to do exactly what you do.
And I do a lot of writer conferences. I speak to a lot of young writers or old writers or whoever. And the first thing I tell them is if you're in it for the money, don't do it. And so many of them are in it for the money. They want to be rich and famous. But
I used to be a publicist at UA Press, and that was the first thing I would tell my authors is like, you're not going to get rich off of this. And they're like, what? Really? And it's like, no, seriously.
Oh, I get that all the time.
It's not going to happen.
But you've got 46 books and you had 2 movies. Actually had 2 movies.
And you're a billionaire, right?
Absolutely.
Richest man in the state of Alabama.
If you move that decimal point way over.
That's okay. Well, I think you're rich in other ways.
I hope so.
Yes.
Again, it's that thing about sitting in that studio and trying to affect somebody in a positive way.
Right.
If I could do that through the writing, if these stories inspire people to try a little harder or just to read the next story,
yeah, exactly.
Then I've accomplished what I'm trying to do.
Excellent. Well, we've been talking about football and coaches, so we have to bring up the Bear. Mm-hmm. So Coach Paul Bryant, who used to coach for the University of Alabama, and you wrote a book about him called The Bear.
That's what the world needs is yet another Bear Bryant book. Right?
Exactly, right? Well, yours is good. I think it was really good. But it was based on what I've read. It's based on the screenplay by Al Browning. Is that correct?
Yep. Here we go again with the
screenplay
thing.
Turning into a book. You're getting good at these.
Al Browning was a sports writer. He was the editor of the sports editor of Tuscaloosa News, the Knoxville News Sentinel, and several other papers. And he passed away quite a few years ago. But before that, he wrote a script for what he thought would be a miniseries based on Coach Bryant. Oh. And when I read it, this was after he had passed away. I talked to a gentleman who wanted to do a movie based on it, but he wanted a book first. And when I read it, not a lot of new stuff, but a whole different slant on Coach Bryant than what I'd seen, primarily because Al had talked to a lot of people that were very close to the Bear. Al himself was very close, much closer than the journalist probably should have been to one of his primary subjects. But just because it looked at Coach Bryant's life in a little different way, that a lot of it had been told. There have been some very good biographies of Coach Bryant.
Right.
And I almost don't call it a biography. It's more like, okay, here's a little different shading on all those other biographies that you may have read.
Well, it's kind of debunking some myths about him too,
Yes.
right? And so you didn't get to work with Al, or did you get to work with
He
Al?
had already passed away when the fellow who had bought the rights to that screenplay came to me.
I got you.
And he later fell by the wayside, and I actually took co-author credit with Al's widow.
Oh, that's nice. So do you think there's a nugget in that book that would be great to share with our audience? Like
It's almost a cliche.
Some of the myths about Coach Bryant that...
People know that he grew up poor.
Right.
They know that he came to Alabama and kind of put on airs. He actually put on a suit for the first time when he came to Alabama. But they don't really realize how poor he was. When he first started playing football, he actually drove nails into the bottom of his work shoes to have cleats.
Wow.
Oh.
And that's blisters galore. And yet he was able to become a good enough football player to get an offer to come play at Alabama. And I didn't realize he had coached the military team during the war. Mm-hmm. He was going to go to the University of Arkansas, his home state, and be the head coach there. And he was on the way back from that interview when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, which changed everything. Little things like that I don't think have been adequately told, but he managed to overcome all of that. He went to Kentucky, where he was definitely second on the list behind Adolph Rupp. Mm-hmm. Those kinds of things, he never gave up, though. And that's really the thing. All of these books, in one way or another, if you give up, you're never going to succeed. You have no chance of succeeding.
Exactly.
But if you keep working at it, you don't lose hope, you will succeed to some extent, at least get part of the way there, maybe all the way, maybe beyond anything that you could have dreamed about.
Kind of like Jalen Hurts.
Yes.
Can you tell I'm a big fan
Or
of Jalen
Dabo
Hurts?
Swinney.
Well, or Dabo.
Or a bunch of other people whose stories I would love to tell.
Well, you still have time.
Yeah.
I mean, we're encouraging you to add to your list.
I'm not going to let AI, I'm not going to let artificial intelligence write any of these.
Good for you.
mean, we've talked about that with some of our other guests about AI and how challenging that is. I mean, even as a print magazine, Susan, as our editor, has to make sure that she's very clear with the people who are submitting articles that this has to be your own work. It can't be AI. And then we have people who are using AI for self-publishing and for creating the covers of their books and things like that.
Sometimes big publishers publishing a book written by AI.
And I just feel like, I don't know, what is your whole thought on this? Because I know it's really challenging for someone like yourself you're actually putting the work in and you're doing hours and hours of writing and research and trying to get it done right. And then we have, this technology now that's coming behind us that can just do it in 10 minutes.
But it can't do it right.
No.
I'm convinced. Now, maybe someday, maybe those mainframes are going to get smart enough that they can turn out prose that is warm and human. I doubt it. I just don't see it happening. But, just recently, the big story in publishing is Penguin Random House stopped a publication of a major novel that they paid a lot of money in advance to an author. She had published it before online, self-published. And then they realized that she didn't write it at all.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
the computer wrote it, and she's blaming it on her editor that she hired before she self-published.
Okay.
Did she not read it?
I know.
Before she self-published? Oh. But anyway, they're aware of it. There are some huge lawsuits. I'm actually part of a $1.5 billion lawsuit, class action suit, and it's against one of the big AI companies who just went out and sucked up a bunch of books.
Everything. Yeah. I have a lot of friends that are involved in that.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And we're probably going to get $1.50 a piece.
Right.
Or free credit monitoring for a year or something like that.
And I don't think, the money is not the issue. The whole point is,
Make them
to
quit.
protect your work.
The
right.
copyright, yep.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh my gosh.
But it's a challenge, but I see it in all other media too.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of the voices you hear on the radio are not human.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, even one of the big chains now is saying, guaranteed to be human. iHeart is saying that on the air.
Well, I will say we did this a couple of years ago. We sent a letter out to our subscribers because we do have this Friends organization where people can make donations and contributions to help support the magazine and this podcast.
And we'd really like you to donate, just so you know, become a friend.
Yeah, alabamaheritage.com. And one of the things that I did is I actually, and this was before AI got really big, but I sent a letter out to our subscribers with a picture of Cindy Sanford, who is in charge of our office. She's in charge of our circulation. She's a real person. She is the person who will actually answer the phone when you call. So for me, I felt like that was really a really important story to tell because we are a small office. There's only 4 of us here. And I think people appreciate the fact that, because we've actually had people tell us that when they call and Aunt Sandy will pick up the phone, they're like, oh my gosh, you're a human?
I wasn't ready to talk to a human.
Exactly. I thought I was going to have to dial 1, push 1 or whatever because all the options had changed, And so it's usually that kind of thing. So you're right. You got to keep the humanity to everything. I mean, we're going to lose too much.
I just spent all morning, by the way, with ChatGPT trying to get them to help design me an image to go on my Facebook header.
Oh.
And they can't do it.
Well,
You have to do so much to get it to be refined.
We'll do that for you. Just let us know. We'll hook you up.
We'll help you out.
Yes, I will.
So you also publish books under a pseudonym, Jeffrey Addison.
Yep.
What inspired you to start writing under that name?
We actually did a 3-book series together. Edie Hand, who is known to a lot of people for her cookbooks and being Elvis Presley's first cousin, and she's a TV personality, an ad agency owner, and all that kind of thing. She wanted to tell a story about her and her brother and a very moving incident that happened around Christmas time. And we wrote a novella together. And at that time, I was writing about NASCAR and football and war. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to write these on a little different, softer note. And I don't want people to think it's about football or NASCAR or war. And I picked Jeffrey Addison because A, would be on the bookshelves way up in the upper left-hand corner where people start scanning. Didn't work. I put Edie Hand first, so she's down there in the middle under the H's. But we actually have had a lot of interest in that. That's another publisher we put out of business, by the way.
Oh, because they couldn't keep up with the sales. You were selling too much. They were overwhelmed.
The short story, the publisher who picked up the first book actually went out and designed a book that cost a lot to print and put together. And Walmart bought like 50,000 of them.
Oh, wow.
They didn't buy them, though. They took on consignment 50,000. They shipped back 25,000. Still, selling 25,000 books is spectacular.
It's a good, yeah.
But the publisher was losing about a nickel on every book. So that pretty much put him out of business.
Oh.
Then we found another little publisher to pick up the second books, and they went through the same thing.
Wow.
Oh, my goodness. Well,
Publishing has changed for sure.
That's true.
It's a tough business. Absolutely. Even the big guys are.
Yeah, a lot of them are using print on demand. So that meaning that once the order is placed, then the book is printed at that moment. So there's a lot of that type of technology.
And that's
being
created
used.
a whole different kind of publisher that some people are calling hybrid.
Yeah.
Because they do the ebook, they sell the audiobook rights to somebody else, Audible or whoever. And then they do print on demand, and they have to go out and find a distributor.
Right.
And the world's biggest distributor of books just went bankrupt last summer, Baker and Taylor, which really hurt libraries.
Oh, yeah.
And hurt us too, because that was the primary distributor of our print on demand books that we do with this hybrid publisher. But now Simon & Schuster's picked them up. So
Oh, wow.
we'll
That's
see how that goes.
Yeah,
That's a big name.
Yep.
definitely
One
positive.
of the big 5.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Don, we've reached the point in our interview where we'd like to ask you a few more questions in a segment called Before We Go. So, or before you go, I should say. So just to get to know you a little bit better.
I'm here for a while.
That's right. You're stuck.
He's spending the night. I forgot to tell you all.
I brought my pillow and my plushie.
Well, that means we're going to put you to work then.
Yeah.
That's all right. That's all right. So my first question is, what is one Southern word or phrase that you have to fight the urge to put in every book?
Y'all.
Y'all.
That was what I was about
the
to say.
obvious question, probably. Obvious answer.
Yeah.
I will say one, on Forever Season, when I submitted that to a legendary book editor that did that book, I used the word chert Chert. You guys know what chert
don't.
is?
I don't.
It's like clay.
Okay.
And there's actually chert pits where you can mine this clay, and they use it for a lot of things. And a chert rock is some compressed clay that we used to throw at each other growing up out in Springville when we had fights. Well, he wanted me to take that word out, and I didn't. I said, no, Bob, it's a good old Southern word.
Yeah.
And I still get occasionally somebody will ask me, what's a chert?
Chert.
I have to ask that a lot of all the different Southern words. So
It's a lot of colloquialisms
Yeah.
that we use. That
we just have to learn.
you know, Caroline's from New Jersey. She ain't from here, so
I'm
It's
a
like- so
military child.
she's
I am a
learning.
child of the world.
You could probably
So
bring us lots of words.
I can bring you lots of words from other languages too.
So whenever you go to Tuscaloosa for an Alabama football game, are you going to go to the stadium or are you going to go to a local dive bar?
I wouldn't come and put up with all that traffic and all those people unless I had a seat in the stadium.
When you went to school here, did you ever go to the games?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, because we got in free and as a student.
That was a good time.
Now, the bad thing was I had to work on Saturdays a lot when I started working part-time radio in Birmingham. So I remember sitting on the air on a 50,000 watt radio station playing rock and roll, and I had a little TV over there and watched the Alabama Ole Miss game where we came back and beat Ole Miss. Scott Hunter
Oh my gosh.
as quarterback.
And so you're screaming when you're supposed, you know, because you're excited about the game when you're supposed to be
Right.
saying something
Oh,
else.
I was excited about that
know?
grassroots record I just played.
Hey, whatever you got to do.
But Scott Hunter just threw another touchdown pass.
That's funny.
So, which of your characters would you like to grab a beer with?
Joe Glass would be a good one in
And
the
he's from which book?
Hunter Killer series. He's a submarine captain. I think he'd be kind of cool. But really, Elaine's dad, he was an interesting fellow.
Yeah, he sounds like he
we
was.
make him probably even more interesting than he really was. But he
That's a liberty.
just somebody that would do something like that. I'd love to ask him why.
Seriously.
Why?
Yeah.
And I know what he would say over that beer. He would say, you know what? I found a way that I could help win the war by saving lives instead of killing people.
Yeah.
And that's one of the themes that we use throughout the series.
Pretty powerful.
I love that. What is the farthest location you've reached on your ham radio?
The other side of the world.
Yeah.
Yep. Out in the middle of the Indian Ocean. That's called the antipode. The other part of the world, exactly through the earth all the way, as far as you can get from here, is called the antipode. And there are several little islands out there where nobody lives there, but they'll go operate from there. And it creates melee on the amateur radio bands because everybody wants to contact them.
That's amazing.
So,
That's cool.
which is the truer form of radio? Voice or Morse code?
You mean ham radio? I think they're all equal. Now, having said that, half the operating that I get to do nowadays, I still do Morse code. And Morse code is not required anymore to get a license. Used to, you had to be able to copy a certain speed in Morse code.
Yeah.
That's not the case anymore. But it's still a very viable means of transmission because you can reach out farther with Morse. And some of the digital modes now, too, that have been developed, you can actually reach out farther. You can actually talk to people that you can't even hear
Wow.
down in the noise level.
Wow.
It pulls them out.
And then there's
shortwave
and then
radio.
there's no language barrier too in terms
Most
of
of the world speaks English.
yeah.
And I keep saying I'm going to get on there and practice mi español. No, mi español no es muy bueno.
Okay,
was
you
me
and
too.
Susan get
Yeah.
together and y'all can practice that.
So, our last question of the day is if you could interview any historical figure for your Untold Millions project, who is at the top of your list?
George S. Patton.
Oh,
And probably a lot of that is because we just finished this series where Elaine's dad actually stopped Patton and the Third Army in their tracks, which you didn't stop George Patton. Eisenhower couldn't stop
Right.
George Patton. The Nazis couldn't stop him.
exactly.
But they had a bomb in the middle of one of the main roadways when Patton's Third Army was coming through, and they were out there trying to defuse this thing. And if it blew up, it was going to blow up the road and completely block it. And he stopped Patton, and later Patton came by and said, I appreciate it. You did the right thing.
Wow.
And then he let a few more curse words fly and said, but don't ever slow down the Third Army again.
That's amazing.
Sounds about right.
Well, I think he foresaw a lot of what was going to happen with the Cold War. And that's what's coming back now. The last book in this series will be called The Long Homecoming. And it actually gets over into the Cold War and what our hero Edward Hume was doing in the Cold War, trying to help us win that when he's defusing atomic weapons now instead of just regular old traditional weapons.
Right. So our listeners, they can catch your information on donkeith.com,
Yes,
correct?
very complicated website, donkeith.com.
So DONKEITH.com.
Yep, Keith breaks the rule. I before E except after C, or is sounded as A and neighbor and way, or Keith.
I love that.
As a former English teacher, I appreciate that. We've had so much fun talking with you.
It is fun. Let's do it. Let's go ahead and do another one.
We're going to sit here for about 6 more hours, but for this episode, we're going to stop. So how about that? So thanks for joining us.
It has absolutely been my pleasure.
it's been
Thank you
great.
so
so
much.
fun.
So we want to thank our guest, Don Keith, for being on Coffee and History, a Conversation with Alabama Heritage. You can find our podcast wherever you listen and also watch us on our YouTube channel. Don't forget that if you want to subscribe to our print quarterly magazine, just log on to alabamaheritage.com.
Or give it as a gift to
Yes.
whoever you love.
It makes a great gift. Until next time, thanks for listening, but I need more coffee. So bye, everybody.
Bye.
Coffee and History, a Conversation with Alabama Heritage is brought to you by the good folks at Wind Creek Hospitality and the Porch Creek Indians. Our theme music is composed by Paul Lewis Reeves and Jay Price. Our editor, Robert Briscoe, ensures we sound fantastic. Listen each Tuesday for new episodes wherever you get your podcast, or visit our website at alabamaheritage.com.